All right, welcome to episode 197. Um, it looks like the new update for Discord does not cover my beautiful taskbar down here.
The
So
taskbar.
when you
Oh
go
yeah.
full screen, that's pretty frustrating. So I'll have to
Play
edit
with
that.
the settings.
Yeah,
Maybe.
play with that settings. But that aside, let's get back on track. Welcome to episode 197 of Trek Live. In this week's episode, we're going to be talking about Kelvin Timeline and guessing each other's favorite ships. Anytime we talk about any ship, any spacecraft, anything in space, I get excited, and I know Bill does too, so it should be a good time.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I love to guess each other's recurring topic. It's always fun, and I always have it on, like, at least in the back of my mind. Like, I don't want to go too long without incorporating something from the Kelvin timeline. I think it's an important part of the franchise. I think it's an important piece of the whole ensemble of shows and crews and um, components of the whole thing that we love, that is Star Trek. And because it's just three movies, I feel like it can kind of fall into the background. They're obviously divisive in some corners of the fan base, but we love them. I think they offer a ton of interesting things to think about and talk about, and really excited to get into it today.
Yeah, and again, I feel like we haven't talked about the Kelvin timeline in a while. We've been heavy in kind of the Berman era stuff,
Yeah.
with lots of talk about Deep Space Nine, and just because I mean, both Bill and I were kind of in that realm towards the end of both of our rewatches currently. So, or mine's over with, and Bill's is on the other side of the 2/3, maybe completed. So
3/4.
3/4.
Believe it or not.
Nice.
Yeah, getting there.
Um,
But I am also I'm going to be watching these movies as part of that pretty soon. I'm getting towards the end of, which I guess is the next thing, the rewatch recap. I'm getting towards the end of Voyager. I only have a handful of episodes left since the last time we did this. I've watched a huge chunk of season 7 of Voyager. I broke my cardinal rule and watched a couple episodes on most of the weekdays this week. Usually I kind of relegate my Star Trek watching to the weekend, for whatever reason. This week I broke that rule and found myself watching the first handful of episodes from season 7 of Voyager, like on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday nights. Um, and that kind of gave me a running head start. We had a snowstorm here on the East Coast this weekend, so didn't have a whole lot of.
Anytime there's weather, that's prime Star Trek
It sure
watching
is.
time.
Yeah, you know it. You know it. And I took advantage. I kind of tend to do this anyway. I feel like when I get towards the end of a show and I can, like, sense a benchmark coming, to kind of transition into something that kind of definitely um, inspires me to pick up the pace a little bit to, hit that benchmark. And with the end of Voyager, probably in the next few days, I will be going into Enterprise for their 4 seasons, and then the Kelvin timeline, and then the new stuff. So that's very much front of mind from this probably first 3/4 ish of season 7 that I just watched. Highlights definitely include Lineage, The Void, Flesh and Blood, the big 2-hour two-parter. Um, Shattered is an interesting one. Like, I've always really liked that. I always enjoy it. It's fun. But when I did the season 7 survey uh, for Voyager season 7, Shattered won. It really surprised me. Like, I always viewed it as, like, it's a fun kind of diversion. It's fun. It's a fun trip down memory lane. It's like a spin on the clip show idea, like kind of going back and revisiting their greatest hits, but finding a way to do that creatively and not have it be just like a cheap, budget out. Um, and it surprised me this time. It's pretty poignant. It really hits on a lot of the Janeway Chakotay notes. I feel like it's an important sort of
Yeah, very important
point along. Yeah, that had just about done the show, like half the season left. It kind of takes inventory of how far those two characters have come with their relationship with each other, and as the leaders of this ship, how many things they've been through, and how much the crew has changed, and their whole experience. So I think I understood. I think I took away something important this time around watching that, after seeing how much the fan base out there, at least the ones we're connected with on Twitter, love that episode. I think that's one of the benefits of doing. Kind of talked a couple weeks ago about like the rewatch strategy and finding new ways to watch this and have new things to think about. And this survey experience with kind of putting the finger on the pulse of the people we connect with and what episodes really resonate with people. And Shattered's one of the few that really kind of stood out along that process as a wow, that's really loved more than I realized. And having that information in the back of my mind and then sitting down to watch it, kind of looking for what makes this resonate so much. I feel like I got something out of that and really enjoyed it. So that was a big highlight this time around.
That's good. Good. Always a big fan of Voyager, and especially that season 7s in general are usually generally pretty tough at times. Yeah, it's nice to have a decent run in there.
It's definitely good. Season 7 of Voyager, I feel like, gets really. I think they kind of. It's a different tone, I think, than 5 and 6, especially 5 and 6 when Braga was running it. I think they really. I think we talked about over the last few weeks. Really lean into the big science fiction ideas and ambitious storylines, and I think they have a voice of their own. And season 7, I really feel like they're really putting their finger on character and allegorical old school Star Trek kinds of stories. You got episodes like Critical Care about healthcare policy, and episodes like Repentance, which is about capital punishment, and Workforce, about employment and living to work, working to live, kind of things. Like, it really puts its finger on the issues of the day, the way that like TOS would do in the 60s. Quite often, lineage with like genetic enhancements for babies, and how to deal with all those things. Like, they really do get back into the allegorical, real world. Sometimes, maybe depending on your mileage, will vary. Kind of variants, like, is it almost too on the nose or too bonk on the head? Issue stuff, but different tone in season 7 that I'm really enjoying.
Nice.
Next, before we get into the topic, Card season 1 is the season I'm looking at this week. It's kind of a tough one. I know it's tough.
Man, this is gonna be tough. I gotta bring up a list, and even then,
yeah, go ahead. And if you can't, if you need more time and we got to do it offline, that's fine. I don't want to eat up too much of your time with a struggle with this, because it is tough. I feel like I've gotten the sense from people, especially with this season, even more so than Discovery and later Deep Space Nine. It's really serialized, and it can be tough if you haven't seen it multiple times or you don't have a really strong recall of the individual episodes. Parse together, pick apart, like, oh, this is the one where that happens, and this is the one where that happens, to have a top 5 a couple of years later. But it's been going pretty much, I think, as expected. I'll say that, like, as somebody who has watched the show a few times and has been interested over the last couple of years, which episodes stand out, and kind of following those conversations.
Do a top 5, I guess.
Let's do it. Let's see what you
got. 5 is Remembrance.
Okay. Violet.
4 is The Impossible Box.
Okay.
3 is Absolute Candor, I think. Yeah.
Candor. Okay.
2, Stardust City Rag.
You're gonna pick that one.
And Nepenthe, I think, that's the one where they go back to visit
Riker and Troy.
Riker and Troy. Yeah, let's do that one.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
So yeah, there we go.
Your votes are there.
Yeah.
You're part of the the voting body
Vote
now.
has been cast. Yes.
Vote has been cast.
But
You didn't do anything that was like crazy.
it does make me realize that I do probably need to at least visit a few episodes, maybe in Picard, because yeah, it's been a long time, maybe since even first run since I've watched a Picard episode.
Probably.
So, yeah.
And it is right around the corner.
Yes.
March 3rd, season 2.
About a month away.
Yeah. Yep. And I kind of mentioned this to you yesterday offline. I'm kind of in a tight spot. I'm coming up pretty quickly, like I was saying on the rewatch recap, on the new stuff. Like it's really not that far off.
Enterprise left, right?
Going lately. Just Enterprise and then the new stuff. And Picard season 1 pretty early on in that. So
yeah,
just debating, do I want to rewatch season 1 like in the next month, or do I just want to hold off and wait and hit it when I hit it in the rewatch? Which is probably what I'm going to do. But it's just the timing, and doing this rewatch thing with the full deal is different now than it was 5 years ago, because you run into eventually stuff that's actually running now. It's not a finite list of episodes like it used to be. It's a whole new world we're finding ourselves in. Rob says that he and Grace, his partner, are desperately trying to finish her first time watching Voyager, so she can start Picard season 1 before season 2 airs. I feel you, Rob. That's find myself in the same dilemma. Not the same, but trying to fit in a Picard season 1 rewatch pre March 3rd is definitely on my mind. Something I'm thinking I might want to do.
Yeah.
Cool. So I guess we should get into the topic of the day, our guess each other's. While we're kind of getting ready, this is for anybody who might be watching this new. Our ship episodes tend to do pretty well, kind of unsurprisingly. It feels like this is a pretty good subset of Star Trek conversations out there. There's whole channels that we know and respect and have seen for a long time that really focus on these things, and there's a lot of appetite for talking about Star Trek.
Yeah.
Ship stuff. And so if anybody's watching this for the first time, we have a whole playlist of Guess Each Other's for all kinds of things: episodes, characters, props, sets, ships, different kinds of ships. We've done hero ships, we've done recurring, frequently used ships that are not hero ships, and we've done like one-offs as well. This is sort of chapter 4 in that sub-series, focusing specifically on Kelvin Timeline. Yeah, we could go even further and do, discovery ships or ships from TOS, or you could really
you could get really
whittle
specific.
it down to heroes, ship shows. Yeah, some of them even species. There's enough of them that you could do it. But as we typically do with this, we'll do our guesses first, guesses for each other, kind of put them on the board. Lay our cards down, and then we'll reveal our actual lists, and then we'll cover sort of the whole of everything. We'll touch on pretty much everything that ends up on the board, and maybe even a few that don't are also on our mind. So it's really just as all these kinds of topic approaches are, just an approach to talking about Star Trek, and this is a way to guarantee that we touch on all kinds of things.
And speaking of the board, it's up on the screen currently. Sorry, because Kelvin Timeline was so long, it kind of pushed our video feed to be super tiny, and so
you don't want to barely there, but you're there.
You don't want to see our ugly mugs anyway, and I want to make the board kind of because that's really what it's really about. So I mean, we're still here.
We're here,
but we're just really tiny. And I guess that was the graphics department to blame for that. So I'll send them a complaint for you guys and file it. But yeah, let's Bill. I won't be able to chat as much because I'll be running the board. But
I'll try to fill the void while you're populating the information for the guesses. Do you want to put yours up first for me? Is that get that out of the way?
Yeah, we can do that. Let's just get both of our guesses out first.
All right, Cool.
So I'll go first here.
This is always a tough. So it really, this Guess Each Other's conversation really does lean on like how much there is to choose from. And the good thing about this one is that there's not that much. It's just 3 movies. It's not so vast. So I feel fairly confident that our guesses lists will be somewhat close to the actuals. You never know though. There's a lot of deep cut kinds of choices that we could go with across those 3 movies, but I feel like the big ones are pretty big and loom pretty large.
Oh my gosh, my mouse is not wanting to cooperate. So speaking of big, as I try to, for some reason I can't click and I can click and drag us, but not the actual text itself. There we go. So my number 5, guess for Bill as I struggle bus. Is Nero's mining ship, which is technically a Romulan design. I think it's such a unique ship, and maybe Bill can kind of talk about this, but when you reboot a series, it's tough to make a lot of these ship designs that are so iconic feel so fresh and different. And to me, this ship, and spoiler alert, it's on my list, just because it has some science fiction-y stuff with this cool drill kind of feature, but it just looks different and looks menacing and it looks scary, and you tie it with also the anomaly that it comes through, and so it's on my for Bill. So yeah.
Not a bad guess. I'll say that. It definitely looms large in that movie. Like it factors very heavily in the Kelvin Timeline in general. Pretty foundational to the whole thing. Yeah, I mean, there are kind of like with all the movies, I feel like there's hero ships and then there's like the adversary's ship, and in these movies that feel like it's definitely the case. Like there's this pretty finite population of the bigs that really kind of dominate at least my own thought process with this topic.
All right, so my next pick for Bill, yes, I grabbed it first try, is The Vengeance,
Okay.
which is another, like Bill talked about, it's technically an adversarial ship. It's again, it's a large piece. It's I think it's a very unique design because if we're talking Starfleet kind of ship design, they stick to a gray white kind of type of combo, and this feels different in that it's different. They go a darker theme, and it kind of fits the theme of the ship and about war and things like that. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a kind of a hybrid because it's got it's got the Starfleet design. It's got like a hero ship kind of a feel in some ways because it's from that lineage. It looks and feels, at least on the basics, like a hero ship, Starfleet ship. But it is pretty menacing, and it is the antagonist's ship. So kind of weirdly fits in both columns and within the movies.
My next guess is the Kelvin.
Okay.
It's a brief, very brief, but very impactful. Impactful. What is it? 13 minutes or something at the beginning of the which it kind of interacts with some of the other ships on the list. But I think it's I guess I'll talk about it a little bit more. But I think it really fits it bridges the gap from. I feel like it really feels at home in actually TOS, and so it kind of feels that kind of retro enough. So yeah, that's my
good guess.
I think for my next guess for Bill, it will be. There's an audio clip maybe that is more relevant, or more recognizable, I should say. It's the jellyfish ship, which is the Vulcan science ship that Spock uses to do what he does in 09. And then my final guess for Bill is the Enterprise A. I think it's the final, like the refit at the end of Beyond that the Enterprise goes through.
Okay. Definitely good guesses. The Enterprise for the Kelvin Timeline is an interesting one because it's kind of reinvented a couple of times. The digital model that they use in 09 is, I believe, pretty identical to the one that they use in Into Darkness, but in Beyond, it's slightly tweaked before it gets destroyed. There are some adjustments made to, I think, capitalize on the battle sequence and some of the decisions that they make with the way the swarm ships take apart the ship. They kind of thin out the nacelle pylons and the neck of the ship are made to look more vulnerable, so that it's more of a sitting duck when they deal with the swarm of ships. And then there's, of course, the A at the end of Beyond, which is another kind of repackaging of the Kelvin Enterprise. So it becomes like which model is the Beyond a different choice, and then the A is a different choice, definitely, because that's definitely a different ship, a newly constructed model. But you did well. We'll get to my actuals in a short while here. I'm going to give you my guesses for you, so we can kind of fill that portion of the board out, and then we'll start talking about our actuals. You kind of said it, and I'm not going to change my list. I'm not going to cheat. I did not have the Narada on my guest list for you, and I feel ashamed. So I kind of fell into this rabbit hole with the different Enterprises. I have at number 5 for you, the Enterprise A, which again, it just kind of couldn't recall previous conversations with you where maybe you tipped your hand on which of these various Enterprise designs you prefer along the way of the three. So I kind of took a shot in the dark, and I put a couple of them on here at the expense of the Narada for one. And I suspect, well, I know that somewhere along the way I have something in here that doesn't belong because of the Narada. My number 4 for you is going to be the jellyfish ship, Spock's ship in 2009. Which, like you said, when I think of the jellyfish ship, I hear a sound effect in my head of the like twirling. There's definitely a really memorable audio sound that comes from that ship. Like a lot of the sound design in these movies is there's a lot of really memorable, cool stuff. But that feels fresh and new and different, and not kind of harkening back to sound effects of old. That's a totally new thing, which makes sense because the jellyfish ship originates in the Prime Timeline, beyond anything we had seen yet at that time. It's a new piece of technology. It's a prototype. It's something that we shouldn't recognize, and on all levels, I think that was successful to create something fresh and different and exciting. So feel pretty good about that being on the list. I have the Franklin on here from Star Trek Beyond.
Oh, I forgot. How can I forget
that? Which is a really, it's a really cool sort of ship that shares some lineage with the NX class. One of the cool things that Beyond does is it kind of embraces Enterprise as a part of the continuity, as like the one thing that sort of continues to stand in this Kelvin timeline because it happened. The divergence in the timeline takes place after Enterprise, so all of that history is there. All those design aesthetics are kind of there. So the Franklin looks like a natural ship that would kind of originate from that time, and is like an old rust bucket by the time we meet it and beyond. But it has some kick, and it's pretty cool design. I love the callback to the NX class, and the bridge is cool. The interior stuff that we see with it is neat. And I just remember watching the trailer for the first time and being like, "Is that an NX? Like, could they actually be doing that?" And even cooler than that, they found a way to put a unique spin on that old design. My number 2 for you is the Kelvin, the USS Kelvin. I think the timeline's named after it. Got to imagine that it's going to factor pretty heavily on these lists. Is the divergence point, and it does, like you said, it feels like a design. As soon as I saw it, I felt like, oh man, this looks like something that would come out of from my childhood growing up. You would find online and in old books, like old technical manuals, like old starship designs that were surrounding TOS, like the FASPA game, like the products like that, all put out these alternate ship designs of the 23rd century that were contemporaries of the original series. And I always felt like the Kelvin felt like something that would come out of one of those books, or one of those flyers or whatever they were, and feels right at home in that timeline. I love the Kelvin. And then my last guess is the Enterprise, just the 09 Into Darkness version, the sort of reinvention of the Enterprise. I don't know. Like I said, I cannot recall where you stand on these varying versions of the Enterprise, the original, the Beyond non-A, and the Beyond A. So we're gonna find that out today, which is cool. That's maybe one of the coolest things about this conversation as we get going, is we can kind of hash all that out, learn that. But we have some similarities, at least, on each other's guesses. A lot of crossover, just with, I think, one different ship on each. I have Franklin on mine, and you have, actually, no, we have 2. You have the Narada and the Vengeance on your list for mine. Mm-hmm. I have the Franklin and the the Enterprise original on my my list for you. What do you think?
Pretty close. Pretty close.
Okay. What do you want to do next? Just to get these things up on the board and get you out of the typing and moving stuff around.
Do you want your actual or my actual first?
Let's do your actual.
Okay. So my actual. So my 5 is Nero ship. So
I feel like I really messed up. That's the one I'm regretting big time.
And there's
like I said, but the Kelvin and the Narada are so core to the Kelvin Timeline. Like they are the thing that makes the Kelvin Timeline a thing.
There is a ship for my number 4 that hasn't been mentioned yet.
Ooh, okay.
Which is the Klingon D4.
Oh, okay.
Is my 4th pick. It's I think it's a unique design. Again, I talked about it when I was guessing Phil's actual list. A lot of these designs have such iconic designs, lack for a better word, in the fandom, and so I think a lot of everyone points to the D4 or D7, sorry, and it's a really iconic ship design. But to make it feel dangerous and dark and scary, but also kind of have some clear. And I'm a big Klingon guy. I like Klingon. Ship design, and it just feels really sharp. And it's got this like tail thing on the backside, and it just feels, I don't know, very different. So yeah, that's on my list.
It also feels like it's got some common DNA with the bird of prey. Even like it's got that same shape. Like it feels like it's got some connective tissue that'll lead to the D7 because it's D4. It's obviously predating that, and the bird of prey as well. So I think it's kind of a cool retro. Actually, I like it more than I like some of the Klingon ships that you see in like Disco. Like I feel like the Discovery Klingon ships are kind of more all over the place in terms of the base of their design, and D4 feels like that's an old Klingon ship. So I love that you picked it because it's not on. The more we get on these lists, the better, as far as I'm concerned. Like more deep cuts and
number 3 for me, my actual, is the jellyfish, Vulcan Science, whatever. It's so unique. It's so cool. I love just anytime we get to move anything, like Voyagers and Cells move, and there's some other, obviously, examples, but I just think that design is so cool.
Very dynamic.
And then Bill has knocked my 1 and 2 out of the park. So my number 2 is the Kelvin. I have it right here as well. Again, I talked about it when I guessed it for Bill. It feels so of the time, and it's so cool because 1960s sci-fi can still be made 50 years later and still have that connective tissue, which I just find so great. And that's a testament to the crew that designed it and the visual effects team in the Kelvin universe. Just awesome. Really awesome. And I like that, and we get it a lot too, is A lot of the Kelvin designs, they have like three lower nacelles and then one saucer. And it feels so simple but so cool. Um, and then for my number one pick, it's probably one of the most divisive things that I remember. When '09 first came out, the nacelles are too big, the neck's too skinny. It doesn't the weight distribution is all they can't all the warp theorists out there say it can't work, and the Bassard collectors, the blue, I love those from the very beginning. So yeah, there's things that definitely rubbed me the wrong way when it first came out, but just over time, it just kept growing on me, and it's just such an iconic piece of the Kelvin Timeline. So when I think of the Kelvin Timeline, I think of that Enterprise.
That's right. Yeah.
So that is number one.
Yeah, I can't argue with that. It is amazing how, like you said, it was so divisive at the time, and it probably still is.
Yeah.
A lot of people, it's not going to change because it's a tough, to redesign that ship and to go kind of as bold as they did with not being afraid to shake it up a little bit. I think what like Discovery did with the Enterprise feels more safe and like it's spruced up, and they kind of modernized a little bit, but I think they stayed a little closer to the original design aesthetics. JJ with the Kelvin went a little more off the beaten path and was maybe a little bit more bold with tweaking some elements, but I echo a lot of what you said. So I'll give you mine so we can finish off the board part of this at least, and maybe just have a more relaxed conversation about bouncing around the board and talking about things that stand out. My number 5 is the Vengeance from Into Darkness. I think the size and scope of it, the one of my favorite things in those 3 movies. The Into Darkness is definitely my least favorite of the 3 movies, but there's that warp speed chase in that movie with the Vengeance knocking the Enterprise out of warp. Yeah, the scale of it, the sort of awe of the 2 ships kind of dogfighting almost in warp. Is a really memorable image, and I like the design of, like I said earlier when you kind of put it on there, the oh yeah, you got it. That it's so Starfleet, like on the baseline of it all, like it's the 2 nacelles. It looks like the Enterprise in like profile at certain angles, but it's lean and mean, and or not lean, I guess it's pretty not lean, but it's mean looking and intimidating and a problem for people that are going to come across it. So I think they walked a fine line and made something new and exciting there. My number 4 is going to be the Narada, which I think, when I think of these movies, it's really hard to not immediately go to the first, like you said, 12, 13 minutes of '09 with the Narada coming out of that spatial anomaly and coming across the Kelvin, and just the size and like what the heck is that thing, and it's so different than anything we've seen before, and it's intimidating, and it kind of lays the gauntlet down.
Sorry, guys, I do not have the Narada. I wish.
No. I've always kind of been taken with it. It was so different at the time and so like outside the box that maybe at first I was a little intimidated by how different it was, but over time that's become some of my favorite Star Trek, the stuff with the Narada throughout that movie. Really, the opening, like you said, and your kind of talk about it at the guest portion, the drilling portion of it. There's a lot there with that design and shit. I really like.
And it's so unique because when we think of Romulan technology, it's sleek and mysterious, and you can't see it. And they've got the cloaking technology, and they've got the remote ship from Enterprise that do the dirty work, the drone ship. Sorry, and so just so uniquely different.
But it's a mining ship. Like it's not a part of the like the way I kind of reason it,
like
in
the
my head is
military type of.
yeah, like when you think of the stuff that comes from Earth or from from Earth, like a freighter or like a freighter doesn't look anything like a Starfleet ship.
True.
Like it's totally different,
True.
and it's built for a different purpose. It's probably built by different people, by different portion of the infrastructure on that planet from that empire. In the case of the Romulans, so I don't care at all that it doesn't look like a warbird or like anything we've seen before, because the stuff we've seen before are like frontline Romulan military ships, like from our perspective, and this is a whole different thing. This is a giant mining ship. It's not something we would have come across because we won't spend a lot of time in the Romulan Empire and deep into their territory, deal with that stuff. So that felt new and exciting and different, and I love it. I put the Franklin at number 3. For all the reasons I kind of touched on, the excitement of seeing that trailer for the first time and seeing that ship and wondering like, what the heck is that? Is that an NX? Is it an offshoot of that? And it turned out kind of. They found a really cool way to build off of some of those Enterprise aesthetics with the NX class and the kinds of ships that we would see from Starfleet from that time, and still do something new with it as well. We get some really cool scenes with the Franklin in that movie, with the trying to escape the planet, jumping off the cliff to build enough momentum to activate the engines. Like that's a really cool scene, and obviously the way that they defeat the swarm with Beastie Boys is pretty iconic. I think.
Cool callback too. Yeah.
Yep. My number 2 is Kelvin. The whole thing's named after it, and like I said, that opening of 09 looms so large for me. When I get to that movie in my rewatches, a lot of the time I can always think, is that my favorite thing in Star Trek? Those first 10, 12 minutes of that movie. And I think it's like so, like what Star Trek is about, and the service and the sacrificial stuff that our characters all do, and what they're willing to do. Yeah, it's to me the sort of calling card of that timeline, and it's what brought Star Trek back to life. Those first 10 minutes of that movie, I feel like that's what like announced.
Is there a Soul Shaker?
Star Trek's here. It kind of does feel like, yeah. It's one of my favorites, and like I said, it feels like something that's right out of old Star Trek technical manuals for like contemporary ships of the 23rd century. And great design. My number 1 is the original version. You had me down for the A, I think, or somewhere along the way. There's an A mentioned. Now you had me down for the original first, number 1. Number 5, you had me as the A.
Oh no,
I'm going with the original.
I had the A. Don't give me that point.
Oh, you did?
I get a half a point. Yeah, I edited it, and I guess it must have edited both. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, so yeah, I think the Enterprise original. I love the redesigns and beyond, both of them. I think the ships are gorgeous, but seeing the Enterprise for the first time in 09 and getting to be on that ship again, even though it looked a little different, and there were some different designs and some things I would have done differently if I was in charge and I could have done anything I wanted. There probably are things about it that I would not have done. I would have made the nacelles a little smaller, and maybe thickened the neck a little bit. Like I would have done different dimensions here or there, but there was no denying that for me, sitting in the theater seeing that for the first time, like I was on the Enterprise. This is the Enterprise. This is the Enterprise that needs to exist right now.
Yeah,
it's fresh and different and feels new and exciting, and it's the jolt of energy and adrenaline that this franchise needs. And I felt like it successfully achieved all those things, and I love it. I'm on board with it. It's not perfect, like nothing in Star Trek is, but it's darn cool, and I'm really glad that it exists just the way that it is.
Yeah. And one thing we didn't really talk about is the interiors. And everybody kind of tries to knock the Apple Store bridge on the Enterprise and some of the other ships. I really like that we get like a throttle, like a boat. Like I like that. And then the consoles too on the Enterprise are cool. A
Yeah.
little bright for me, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And then some of the other bridges are cool too. The jellyfish seems really simple in there, and then the Narada is kind of like a more of a, which that's a whole nother ship discussion.
Yeah.
It's industrial, but it's kind of open space. Where in some other ships, in some other eras, were like a deck by deck type of thing, but it seems like, well, I know it's an open space type of situation in some of these ships as well. So, yeah,
I agree with you on the bridge being a little bright and the Apple Store like that's I can't believe that's been said for as many years as it has. That's an old that's an old card these days, but it was very much the thing. I really love the way that the bridge appears in Beyond. It's the same set, it's the same basic design, but they play with the color a little bit for the brief time that we're there and don't see it like a very, very red alert as the ship's being taken apart. Like for the little bit of time that we are on the bridge and Beyond, I think is like kind of the perfect tweak to numb some of those criticisms and wishes for a little different vibe, but still keeping the same aesthetic that we get in that series. So.
Yeah.
We have a couple other lists that just got shared. We have Jeff sharing his. He's got the jellyfish ship at number 5, the Narada at 4, the small Klingon ship from Into Darkness. Thinking that might be the same as yours, that D4, maybe?
Yep.
Correct us if we're wrong, Jeff. The Kelvin at 2 and the Franklin at 1. Very cool. Jimmy 77 as the Narada at 5, the Jellyfish at 4, Kelvin at 3, the Franklin at 2, and the Enterprise at 1. So
that's one
cool,
thing
common
that I completely forgot, and I probably should have put it on Bill's list, is the Franklin. I can't believe and I know you're a big Enterprise guy, and that's just it's not a complete one-to-one rip off of the NX, but that being said,
clearly from that lineage.
It's clearly from that lineage because in my headcanon, the NX class is technically an experimental class, so the ship design isn't technically finished. So we could definitely see a few tweaks here and there. So yeah.
I think there's a good bit of variety here. I like that there are a mix of Federation and non-Federation ships. We have the Enterprise and the Kelvin and Franklin, things like that. But the Narada is very prominent on these lists. The Jellyfish ship is very prominent on these lists. That's the one that was the toughest cut for me. I was torn between the Jellyfish and the Vengeance. I could flip a coin and change that right now and probably be pretty happy about it.
Yeah.
Because Jellyfish is super cool and dynamic and different. Like you said, the movement on that thing, the maneuverability of it, the way that it kind of just like flops around and it does not move in the same way that so many other Star Trek ships. The Star Trek ships tend to move very like, what's the word? I had a word on the tip of my tongue, gracefully, like very big, broad movements, and like they're not always super maneuverable because of how large they are. And the Jellyfish ship, seeing it just like flip around all over the place is really cool. And like I said, that sound effect is like they really nailed that because that's like in my head all these years later still.
Yeah.
And you got the Klingon ships. So we got Klingons, we got Vulcans, we got Romulans, all kinds of stuff here represented. Another like little deep cut that I didn't pick, but I really like is a lot of the shuttle designs that we get in these movies.
I thought you were gonna try to put a wrinkle in there to pick a shuttle or something like that.
I just did. Yeah, they're really cool. To me, they're really faithful callbacks to TOS era shuttles. I love those designs. Medical shuttle in 09, Kelvin, and on through. Are definite favorites if we're talking shuttles. But a lot to choose from. I like Space Dock. I like the Space Dock that we see in 09. It's kind of a different take on that.
Is that a spaceship though?
No, definitely not. That's why it's not on this list.
Yeah.
Didn't do it. That's a space station. You're right. That's a whole different thing. But there's a lot of cool design work on spacefaring structures, I guess we'll say, ship or not, in these movies.
Excelsior was NX class as well. Yeah, wasn't the Prometheus an NX designation as well?
They had NX designations as like, I think the idea, especially later on, is if it's the first ship of its class,
it's an NX.
It gets the NX because it's a prototype for that class.
Yeah,
that's the way I've always kind of read it. And then actually, isn't it? Correct me if I'm wrong, chat, Dan. I think if you watch like Star Trek 3, it's NX 2000 is the Excelsior.
Yeah.
But I think in Star Trek 6, it might be relabeled as NCC 2000 because it's not. Even though it's seemingly the same ship, that's a weird anomaly.
Yeah, that's tough.
I'm almost positive that in Star Trek 6, it's an NCC registry number. So I think back then
that
they were
might be
kind
a
of
miss. Yeah.
that might be a miss. It would not hold up with the way that the NS is kind of used later on, because the Defiant keeps that NX once it's like out of that experimental phase. It's not just like I think what they were getting at there. I think what they were trying to get at was like when you see the Excelsior in Star Trek 3, it's space dock faring, like it's not going out on missions.
Yeah.
It's really a test for that design, and until it's like commissioned as a fully functional starship going out into deep space and running missions and doing whatever it's designed to do, it's going to carry that NX, and then maybe it'll go to the NCC when it's out there doing its thing. But that would not hold true in the 24th century because of the Defiant holding that NX the whole time. So who knows?
But then it gets because they rename it. They let them rename it back to the Defiant. But because registry numbers have always confused me because it's like first two numbers are the fleet number, and then the next two are the number of that ship. So if the Enterprise is in the 17th fleet and it's the first ship of that fleet, but then how does 2000 work? So it's the 20. I don't know.
I don't know either. Registry.
Maybe I'm looking too much into it.
It's one of those fun things to think about. It's kind of like the ways to rewatch Star Trek. The explanations and the theories for how the registry numbers work are plentiful, and there are dozens and dozens of them, I'm sure, out there. Very few of which I think are like completely locked and loaded in canon. Like there are no on-screen explanations for these things. So
headcanon,
who you add, choose to believe in your headcanon is going to carry the day on that front. But we're coming up on an hour here. Any last thoughts on Kelvin Timeline ships? We kind of haven't touched on anything that we didn't pick. Anything that kind of lingering out there that deserves mention?
I don't think so. You mentioned the shuttles. They get kind of shoehorned into some cool moments. That chase in Into Darkness from the D4, whatever Klingon ship they're running from. We see that again. So there's definitely some shuttle love. The Hive, I wasn't sure if you're going to consider that a ship. It ships, a lot of ships. And then I wasn't sure if you were going to try to nitpick one of the when the whole fleet warps to like one of those ships with the 3 nacelles, or one of those. The cool ship designs, don't get me wrong, and and they do some good work with that, but I don't think so. I just think that every time I talk about ship design from the Kelvin Timeline, it makes me appreciate the newness and the freshness to these old iconic designs that we've seen for 50 years. I think they just do a fantastic job. So I always love to highlight that.
I think they walk the fine line really well with putting new spins on old ideas, but staying pretty faithful and within the context of what's believable in the Star Trek universe. Like nothing to me feels, especially within the Starfleet universe, like nothing feels like, oh my gosh, that's not from Starfleet. everything is perfectly in line with something that would exist in the Star Trek universe. You can nitpick about the looks of things and where they fit in timelines and things like that, which is the age-old debate at this point, with from Enterprise onward, really, with how designs work and what fits where. But it's pretty faithful to the overall design aesthetic of Star Trek, I think, through and through, which is kind of my baseline. As long as it's that, I'm pretty open-minded to all kinds of things.
Cool. I think that about does it for today. We'll be back next week for more Star Trek content, and closing in on that number 200, the 200th episode. So stay tuned for another fun episode of Trek Live. You guys know the drill. The discussion does not have to stop here. Twitter and our Discord server are the best ways to keep that going. I want to thank chat. You guys were awesome as always. And thank everybody for watching currently and then after the fact. We'll see you guys next week.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.